Hey everyone, welcome again to Indian Story Read Along. Today we're going to read another book from my childhood. I think I got it in the 90s, early 1990s sometime. I don't remember. This is Amar Chitra Katha's bumper issue number 16, Tales from the Mahabharata. Now, the Mahabharata, we all know, is about the Kauravas and the Pandavas and how they were fighting all throughout the story. But the interesting thing about the Mahabharata that the Ramayana doesn't have is that there's a whole bunch, a ton of tiny little stories that are all through the Mahabharata. And they don't get told that much, but they have kind of been included with so many retellings of this story. So let's take a look at the very first story. You can see it right there on the top. The cover there, the Golden Mongoose. This is the Golden Mongoose. The king of Hastinapura, that's Yudhisthira or Dharmaraja, once performed a great ashwamedha yajna. The ashwamedha yajna is a horse sacrifice. So the horse goes running around to all the kingdoms, and wherever the horse goes, an army follows him, and they have to conquer that kingdom. And they have to say, sure, we will accept your king as the king of our kingdom as well. And so this was something that Yudhishthira did right in the middle of the Mahabharata before they went to the forest. And so that's when this story takes place. He distributed thousands of gold coins among the priests. Rich presents were given to the learned people assembled there. This is all the stuff that they have to do with this particular yajna or fire sacrifice, havan. And gifts were also given away to the lame, the blind, and the poor. So two Brahmins there are talking. So one of them says, this is the greatest yajna any king has performed. And the other one says, he has given away 3 times the dakshina, the gifts ordained for such a sacrifice. So the first Brahmin says, and such an abundance of food. The second one replies, the heavens must be resounding with praise for him. Suddenly, look! A mongoose! But what a strange mongoose! 1/2 of its body is golden. The mongoose made its way to the spot where the sacrifice had been conducted, and there began to roll on the ground. What is this animal doing? And he says to himself, it hasn't happened here either. And he says to everyone there, this sacrifice, O learned ones, is not as great as that of the brahmanas. And one of them is upset. He says, could any sacrifice be greater than this one? The king has spared nothing to make it so. It was conducted with great pomp and splendor. And another guy says, and according to the prescribed rituals. But the mongoose says, and yet it is nothing compared to the sacrifice of that brahmana. So an older Brahmin says, you belittle this sacrifice without an explanation. We are an assembly of learned men and wish to be enlightened. What was that other sacrifice and why was it greater than this one? Mongoose says, I will tell you. In Kurukshetra there once lived a Brahmana. He and the other members of his household, a wife, his son, and his daughter-in-law lived a simple and austere life. So when you see this kind of bubble around there, that means he's telling the story. This is in the story. The Brahmana used to eat only once a day at noon, and his meal was frugal, only a few grains of corn. But a time came when even those few grains of corn became difficult to obtain. A great famine had descended on the land. Even the weeds have dried up, says his son. I could find nothing to bring home for food. Oh no, that's the Brahmana talking. And then his son says, neither could I, father. The household went hungry for several days. Then one morning, the Brahmana comes home. I have found some barley. Today at last we shall eat. The wife and his daughter-in-law pounded the barley. and then divided it into 4 equal portions, one for each member of the household. And then they say, "Come and eat." But just as they were about to begin their meal, "Father, a guest," says his son. And the father says, "A guest?" He goes, "Welcome, sir. Welcome to our home." Now the mongoose is narrating in the pink bubble there. Even in his adversity, the brahmana did not forget his duties as a host. "Here is some water for you to wash your feet." And then when the guest had washed, "Now come and sit here," says the brahmana. He says to the guest, "I'll get you something to eat." Remember, they had nothing in their house except for that barley he had just found. The brahmana went inside and came back with his portion of the barley. "Here, sir, forgive me, but this is all I can offer you." The guest gulped it down without ceremony and began to lick his fingers. The brahmana's thinking, he's still hungry. Now what should I do? Brahmana's thinking, he is my guest. How can I send him away without satisfying his hunger? And then his wife says, "I know what is troubling you. Don't be worried. Give him my share too." And he says, "I cannot do that." He says to her, "You yourself have not eaten for several days, and your body is worn out with work." And his wife says, "If you, who have been suffering as long as I, could give away your share, why can't I? Please take this barley and give it to our guest." The brahmana could not refuse. He took it and placed it before the guest. And now he's thinking, he's still not satisfied, and I cannot blame him. 2 handfuls of barley can hardly appease a man's hunger. Then the son came forward with his share. "Here, father, I know you will worry yourself to death if you send that man away hungry. I am young and I can withstand the rigors of hunger." And then the father says, "The hunger of children is very strong, my son." Remember, they got married very young back then. So he goes, "To me, you'll always be a child, even if you reach the age of 1,000 years. But the youth persisted, and finally the brahmana took his portion and gave it to the guest. And as before, he gulped it right down. Then Brahmana's thinking, he's still looking for more. What am I to do now? And then his daughter-in-law persuaded him to give away her share too, the mongoose is narrating in that blue bubble. And then she goes, "Here, sir, won't you have some more?" And then the man says, to everyone's surprise, "That is enough, you have passed the test." And look, the brahmana is looking all surprised there. And the man says, "I am pleased with all of you. You were prepared to sacrifice even your lives for your dharma." That means duty. And then you can see in the corner there, do you see the mongoose behind the door? As the guest is explaining, hunger drives away righteous thoughts. Therefore, one who conquers hunger has won heaven for himself. Your sacrifice has impressed even the deities. And see that glow around his head? The brahmana realizes he is a deva. That means he's a celestial being. And he's right. Humans cannot conquer hunger. Imagine you're super hungry for a long time, like after school or something. You sit down and you want to have some cookies and milk, and then your mom says, "Oh, you need to go wash your hands." Aren't you a little bit upset you can't have your food right now? Now the brahmana and his whole family went for days and days and days without food, and the moment somebody showed up, they were so ready to give it up for them. And that is something really, really superhuman. No one is able to do that. So then the deva who was sent down to test this family brings down his chariot and says, "Come with me to the abode of the immortals." And the deva took the brahmana and his family to heaven. There's the mongoose down there in the corner. So then he continues, I was a witness to all those wondrous happenings. Later, I went up to the place where the brahmana had stood while serving the guest. There I saw a scattering of barley flour on the floor. I rolled over it, and to my astonishment, to my extreme surprise, one half of my body became golden. So now you see there's no more bubble panels. Now it's a square panel there. So now he's back in real time at the homam, telling the story to all the people assembled there. So now he's there and saying, since then, I have been to every place where a sacrifice has been conducted. And I have rolled over several sacrificial grounds in hope of turning the other half of my body into gold. And now he's walking away, but without success, he says. And I despair of ever succeeding. Great indeed was the brahmana's sacrifice. So, do you know why the brahmana sacrifice back in that Mongoose's story was so great? Even though King Yudhisthira was giving away money and gold and food and everything. Do you know why? I know why. If you know why, if you can think of other reasons, tell us on Facebook, contact us there. But my reason, what I think, is because the brahmana gave away something when he had nothing. He gave away the one thing that he had when he didn't have anything else. And that is actually a real sacrifice, because when you give away one thing and that's all you have, you got nothing after that. And he was willing to do that. Yudhishthira, even though he gave away tons of money and food and clothes and silk and jewels, he still had more. So it's not as though he was giving away everything he had and then he was left to go hungry. Mongoose is saying, when you got nothing and then you give away what little you have, that's the ultimate sacrifice. And so that's the reason, I think. If you can think of another reason why the mongoose is saying what he's saying, again, contact us. We like hearing from you. So this has been another story on Indian Story Read Along, and we hope to see you again next time. Thanks so much.